Hi, everyone, and welcome to week 5 of BUTI Intermissions Conversation Spotlight Series. I'm Nicole Wendell. As you know, I'm the Director of Education here at BUTI, and joining me today is Artistic Director for Jazz at Lincoln Center and legendary trumpet player Wynton Marsalis. Thanks for joining us. Hi, Wynton. How are you?
All right now. How you doing, Nicole? It's a pleasure to be here with you. Hi.
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. I think we'll maybe just jump right in. So, you were a TMC fellow.
I
How was
was.
your time there?
It was great. I was coming from New Orleans from a totally different environment, and I'd never been in the Northeast. And just to see the shed and everybody, and we had great teachers. Gunther Schuller was there, and the Boston Symphony and the whole tradition of people on the lawn. Coming from New Orleans, we didn't have that type of thing, and also the level everyone played on. There were so many fantastic musicians to be in an orchestra of that caliber. Yeah, it was fantastic.
That's great. And you have a very interesting audition story of how
All
you
right.
ended up there. Would you
Yeah.
tell us about that?
So when I was in high school in New Orleans, I wanted to audition for Tanglewood. And the day that the audition was a long way from my house. And I couldn't drive, and I had to take like 4 buses to get all the way out to New Orleans. University of New Orleans, just pouring down rain. So I missed I got there, I was soaking wet, had all my trumpets and books and stuff. And they said that the audition had been canceled. I had to go all the way back home. So I forgot about attending Tanglewood. I was in New York going for a Juilliard audition, and I got lost coming from the audition, and I saw a sign in the Wellington Hotel that said Tanglewood auditions. And just on a whim, I went in, and they were closing down the audition, and someone came out and saw me trying to apply and said, let him apply. But I was younger. You had to be 18 to be in, but I was 17. They said he's only 17. He said it doesn't matter. Just let him come in and play. Um, he looked at my afro. He said, "Okay, where are you from?" We started to talk. And so when he
Yeah.
started to hear my New Orleans accent, he was like, "Damn, how do you get into this music?" So then it was Gunther Schuller who was auditioning me, and
Wow.
he had played on Miles Davis's "Birth of the Cool," and he had written a book called Early Jazz that was very popular at that time. And I played for him. And I didn't think I would get in, but I received a letter saying I got in. So if I hadn't got lost, I wouldn't. If I would not have gotten lost, and if he wouldn't have been auditioned, I wouldn't have been in.
Wow. Like so many things, it's serendipity, right?
Right, absolutely.
What was that like? I think to like wander in and show up and then have him come out and invite you in. Were you nervous? Were you just cool? What was it like?
I was cool, but I was nervous when I was going for Juilliard because I knew that I wanted to get out of New Orleans. So,
Oh,
but then this was just lane yap. But I had my audition memorized. I was prepared for it. I was so determined to get out of the Crescent City that I was prepared. So
yeah.
when I went to play for Gunther, I just knew whatever the excerpts were, the things he was calling. I had most of my everything I played at Juilliard. I actually had from memory. So I wasn't worried. I remember I played Brandenburg Concerto Number 2, and, Pines of Rome, and stuff trumpet players play. I don't know if they're still playing it now, but that's what we played then.
Uh-huh.
Mahler Five, Petrushka, those kind of excerpts, and I was prepared. So I don't think I was nervous just because he was so cool, and I hadn't expected to be an audition. So
Right. That's amazing. You know, when you mentioned that you were there for your Juilliard audition and you say something like, I was trying to get out of New Orleans,
oh man,
I think a lot of students think of that way about their college audition. And, you go to Juilliard, you go somewhere else, you go far from home, and your world kind of opens. Do you think it's important for students to go far from home for college or for school?
yeah. When I was younger, I would always tell people I think they should do it, but now that I'm older, I think everybody has so many different circumstances. Like their home situation is different. They have different things that they have to do. So I don't really, I don't recommend that. I mean, I think that every situation is very individual. You might still have some stuff you need to work out at home, but in general, I would always say, I had a lot of brothers. It was a lot of us in a small space. We were already, we were ready to go. We were about to kill each other. So for me, yeah, but you might be in a different. Plus, your parents might be a certain age. Somebody might be sick. There's so many different things that
Sure.
I think factor in. But for me, I was out of there.
Was it crazy at home? Everybody trying to practice or play at the same time?
It was crazy, but not for that reason. It didn't have nothing to do with practice.
Yeah.
Hold on a second. Let me see if I can get somebody to stop making noise. Okay, you see,
Got a little visitor over there saying hey.
I know I have a big visitor. My son came in there making all kind of noise.
So I have a question from a student.
Hmm.
This is from Dylan Goodman, and Dylan would like to know, how did your classical training at Tanglewood at TMC help you grow and blossom as a jazz musician?
Well, first, just playing with the students I played with. Justin Cohen was a trumpet player with me. He's a phenomenal trumpet player. He was 18 and he could really do a lot of things I could not do. So I learned a lot about playing in the lower register and learning music. He learned his music a certain way, and I think that was an important relationship for me. And the amount of music we played. We have From Week. We're playing a lot of contemporary music. I had not played a lot of that style of music. Hearing a lot of people playing under good conductors on a much higher level. Bernstein came one week. We did Prokofiev fifth.
Wow.
That type of experience you couldn't get that at home. And I mean, you could get a lot of experience in New Orleans. I had a lot of great experience, but like that. So my playing changed a lot, and to meet Vic Firth and people, not just trumpet players. The whole tradition with Armando Guitarra and Roger Voisin, I knew about them from albums, and then I was there talking to them. And yeah, it was overall from an educational standpoint. I learned a lot. I understood something about how high the level of playing was, which I didn't understand that about younger people. Because then the members of the orchestra were like up to 25 or something like that. But everybody was very very serious.
Yeah.
Jim Donato was a trumpet player, could really triple tongue and double tongue really well. And we had another trumpet player named Dana Kemp. He passed away, and he had some type of physical challenges. So he was very short. He suffered from a not dwarfism, but I don't remember the name of it. But I really loved him, and just something about the way he was, the way he would talk, and so yeah, I put a lot of stuff in perspective. I was thinking about him the other day actually. Though he would introduce himself, stick his hand on his mouth. Dana Kemp. I would be messing with him, and I'd hug him and mess with him, and he was serious about playing though. And some of the things we had, like we had a thing that summer where people didn't want to play with him. So I was exposed to other things too. To be honest with y'all, it's a thing that we didn't have that type of thing in New Orleans. Our thing was very communal, and if we saw somebody had challenges, we would never. We loved them like we did. It didn't. The part was secondary to the person.
Hmm.
That some of those things like that too. It's different cultural things that I would notice. I don't get into it that much because it's so much positive for me came out of it. It's not my major memory, but if I'm talking to younger people to give them a realistic view of things, there's a lot I could tell them, about also an aspect of the reality. Also, there was a time when I would say that was the reality, but it wasn't the reality. It was one aspect of the reality,
Sure.
and experiences are that way. Every
Yeah.
nothing is everything is one way. You have moments of this and moments of that.
I think that reality is important to articulate though. Like when you come to some place like TMC or BUTI, it's a different community. It's a different culture. You got people coming from all over the place with different experiences. And yeah, it can be a really mind-opening experience because we're all coming together to play at the same level as our peers.
Right, right.
But
We hope. We hope we're at the same level because for me it was like, ooh, people can play up here. You know,
yeah, I
they're
think
not
I think that experience is common. Like, oh my gosh,
right. Right.
looking
I
around at
see.
everybody.
Yeah, definitely. And as
Yeah.
as the weeks went on, too, it was there was a lot going on, and to see all the different types of students and different ensembles that would play. Yeah, it was great.
You mentioned the educational experience that you had there and learning to play really in the lower register, like a deeper color. And I think that's very unique to the Tanglewood continuum. Like students, a lot of students start at BUTI, end up as TNC fellows, and maybe even BSO players at the end of that. And I, if I'm correct, you taught one of our faculty at BUTI, David Krause. Is that right?
I taught him when he was 13 and 14. His mom would bring him by my house. They come from Long Island. Then I guess I was 27, 26, somewhere in there. But I absolutely loved him like the entire time. Not he as kids did, in Juilliard, but he was a great kid, and he went and played the Israel Philharmonic. His playing or in an orchestra in Israel, and his playing improved a lot. But he was always just golden as a person. It's like his sound. I go hear him play in the Met Orchestra. I mean, David is what can I tell you? He's one of the kind of people who just always had a deep soul and heart, and that comes through in his playing. I tell him I'm so proud of him. When I see him now, I still feel I want to just hug him because I was proud of teaching him. I really truly love him.
And you guys keep in touch still, is that right?
Yeah, oh yeah, I love him. He's like one of my, when I listen to him, either I go or I check him out. It's playing. I look on whenever he has stuff that comes on. I check him out and see what he's doing. I love his sound. It's so beautiful and warm. I love him in the orchestra too, and the intelligence of his playing. He was always very intelligent and curious about stuff. A recital he did with Chris Martin. I see the two of them playing. So yeah, I keep up with him.
It's amazing. It's amazing the friendships and the relationships that you build through music, but also at Tanglewood. I'm sure that you have a bunch of memories. They never leave you, right?
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely.
With you forever.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've played a lot of times too there now, and with David, he has a house that he rents out there. I've gone and hung with him. So yeah, of course, and all the students. Danny Druckmann I met there, and he played in the Philharmonic for many years. When I first left Tanglewood to come to New York, I stayed with him in his apartment, his father and his people's apartment, and so on and so forth. Akita Tano was another drummer I met at Tanglewood. We ended up being roommates in New York that first year. He was playing with the Heath brothers, but he was like 10 years older than me then, so he was 27. And just, I met him at Tanglewood, and it's been many years since then.
Yeah, and you maintained a relationship with Gunther Schuller for a long time.
I, Once again, we could have some of the best arguments. He taught me a lot. When I would record an album, classical record, I would always play for him. I would call him. I would ask his opinion about things, read his books, argue points with him. He has so much integrity and a good argument. We judged festivals together, but I always, we had a long-standing argument about classical music and jazz and what tradition was what, and kind of really, if you want to have really good, deep, meaty, meaningful, long-standing talk about fundamental things that you have to think about a lot. He was unbelievably uh, inspirational to talk to because he was one of those kind of people who studied all the time. And I had the chance before he passed away at a Dave Brubeck festival to recognize the impact he had on me. And he was in a wheelchair then, but it made me feel good to know that because he knew privately, of course, how I felt about him. And we didn't agree on some stuff. We would be heated on. We would go back and forth. But he had such integrity that I felt good about recognizing the impact he had on me and his impact on many musicians all over the world, and his books and his scholarship and his seriousness. If I had something I wanted to play for somebody, I would always play it for him. Even though a lot of times he wouldn't like it, he would be so honest about it. And yeah. I mean, deep love and respect for him.
Wow. Just the stories that you tell paint such an amazing picture of,
Yeah, Gunther.
tradition, friendship.
Gunther was something. I think I go back to when I became older. I think about when I first met him at that audition. He didn't have to let me play on it, and all the things we ended up talking about. United States. He played with Miles Davis on Birth of the Cool. He played in the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra when he was 16. What he felt about his music, what he felt about my music, what I felt about his music, what I thought about third stream music. We would argue about What's the right phrasing for this? What do we know that they played in the Baroque era? How do you know that when nobody else? And they could have been doing this. And what does it tell us when we have these excerpts of Bach, and he wrote his own variations, and this lets you know how they improvised on such and such and such. And what was the Italian Commedia dell'arte, and the way that they improvise in theater is a percussive to jazz, and all the stuff he would. I mean, it was just the stuff he could talk about, and you had to be up on to converse with him. What happened to Shostakovich and how complex the relationship of the Russian people had with Stalin because they cried when he died. It goes on and on and on. What is the real nature of a revolution? And I can tell you the stuff I would talk with him about, and I miss him. I was thinking the other day, man, I want to talk with Gunther about all the stuff that's going on now. We talk about all the racial stuff in America. Boy, we would be, because with him, you could talk with him and he would be honest with you from his point of view. He didn't just give you the
Sure.
kind of, oh yeah, he was great.
What would he say? What would he say if you were on the phone with him now?
He didn't deny the reality of it. He was not a person who denied it, but he also was not somebody who was head rubbing you by feeling like he needed to be sorry for something. So he was great to talk to. He was very direct, and he just had opinions about it, about what people needed to do, and about what kind of decisions. He would always talk about the difference between being a predator and being symbiotic. I mean, I'm using my terms, but that's how he would talk. That as long as you live in a system where all of the heroes are people who take stuff from other people, that's the system you live in. When the heroes become people who are giving things to other people at their detriment, then you will live in a system that will show the fruits of that. And that he knew we had a long way to go in the world, because he was also a global thinker. He didn't remove one struggle from another, and he also had listened to so much music, and he knew how to relate everything to music. He could tell you about Duke Ellington's music, Bartok's music, Stravinsky's music, pandiatonic music, why that's a false theory, or why he could go on and on and on. Why he likes. I need to read the last. I need to read the last part of structural functions of harmony, and why. The reason I don't understand what Schoenberg was doing sonically is because he was trying to unmoor himself from the strictures of Western. I mean, we could go on and on. What about these terse German philosophical treatises of the mid 19th century and Schopenhauer's philosophy? And you need to read this book. I could go on and on when I tell you how he would. And I would read the books, and I would call him, and I would talk with him, and
Wow.
and we would have some, because we saw things in different ways. But always when I talked with him, it was always with love and always with respect.
I can see how that relationship could be so powerful.
Yeah, I
And when you
love it.
say, when you say about changing things a little bit here and there, and what he might think, it brings me back to some of the conversations I've had with other guests about building community and building audiences and using that in a way as a tool to sort of bring people together and start to make some changes around this country and around the world.
Well, you have to want to share with people who don't know anything. You have to want to do that. You have to want to. When I say don't know anything, I mean don't know anything about what you know about, because they
Right.
know what they know about, and it's hard to do that because you define yourself by what you know, and you
Right.
tend to think that because you know something that's important, but a whole majority of the world does not know what you know or care about it. So you have to want to. You have to want to. My father used to always make us laugh. He said, "You can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him thirsty." And it's just, if you're not symbiotic in your way, if you come to people with a disrespect and a kind of head rubbing type of attitude, they don't really need to see you.
Yeah,
You have to
that
want to
makes sense.
share with them. Yeah, the magic of that, and then you have to. And when you don't want to, don't waste your time.
I think I read something that you had said previously about how to sort of build that and how to teach that. And you used an example of the El Sistema model, like older and then the younger, older to the younger to the even younger. How would that function, or how does that function in
Well,
our field at large?
well, I love the old man. Abreu was such a genius, and I was lucky to go through his entire system. He took me through every orchestra. We went one day. We went through. He was explaining everything he did. Oh, man, why you give these medals? You remember those little stars you would get? I mean, he had such a he had insight. His first two teachers were trumpet players,
Aha.
ironically. Okay, so when I met him, I don't. They were maybe my age. Then I might have been, I don't know, 40 something, 45 or something.
Hmm.
And he was saying these are my first two teachers. He still had them with him. And I think that it's natural for us to we learn in ages like that anyway. You learn how to
Sure.
play sports. As you play with kids your age, you learn people older than you. You live in a family that's people older than you. That's like in the Cub Scouts, they had den chiefs. Or there's always some kind of older, younger. Then you get into high school, it's the seniors are looking down on messing with the freshmen, and you learn things. And then I believe in just like a unending kind of cycle because we're all on different cycles regardless of our age. We tend to be very segregationists of everything
Right.
in our culture now. Now we're at the height of that. Black, white, women, men, old people, young people, middle-aged people. I mean, it's unbelievable the level of actual separation in a place that's supposed to be the land of the free. But it's part of the reason is because the markets are segmented so you can sell things to them. And once money becomes the most important thing in your life and the most important thing to do, your humanity is not that important because you're not going to make as much money being humane.
Right.
It's much easier to exploit people, especially if you're intelligent or you know something they don't know. Our business practices lack integrity in many ways. We put people in terrible positions. And I'm not even talking about black people. That's another entirely different issue in the United States. I'm talking about people. And I'm talking about just general people. The decisions that are made are not people friendly. And now we're feeling it. And it's been that way for a long time. But it's like what we say, if you keep chopping down trees, they'll run out. You might have a long time to chop. You might have worked on the heart attack you had. You might have started at 9, eating the stuff you ate and doing everything that you did. Now you might have that heart attack at
Right.
47. Say, wow, what happened to that heart attack? Okay, but you started working on it a
Yeah.
long time ago. So with cultures and with groups of people and with nations, all these things, they're in cycles. So let's see. Let's see about it.
So to that point, what can, BUTI age students, high school age students, what can they start doing now to prevent the heart attack at 47?
Just make changes that you want to see. When you envision something should be a certain way, you make it be that way. And it's going to cost you. And don't think even the people you think you are helping will be grateful for that. Don't think that. There used to be an old saying said, no good turn goes unpunished. There's a reality to making change. It's like uh, Plato's story about the blind man in the cave. The one goes out. The people in that cave don't want to see they don't want the light. It's like
Right.
so you realize that when you're helping or when you're trying to change things, you're helping for the principle. You're not helping for the people. Think you're doing something so somebody can come back to you and say thank you. Do it because you want to see things actually be different. And over your lifetime, you'll see some small changes because this is a big system. My great uncle was born in 1883. He used to always say, "You didn't mess it up. You're not gonna fix it." You got to be a
Wow.
part of fixing it, and be content with being a part of it, and you can achieve a lot.
Wow. You're over here making me think about all kinds of things. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
my great uncle was something. He's a stone cutter for the cemetery.
Wow.
He was deep.
Well, let's move on to another student question. This is from Sophie Urban, and she wants to know what is the best piece of advice that you can give specifically to a trumpet player?
I don't know. It's hard to give good advice, but if I have to give general good advice, the advice I'm going to give is stay in love with your instrument. And I'm gonna evoke the name of Lou Soloff, the trumpet player that passed away. I want you to look him up and read about his life. He did all kinds of things. He loved trumpet players more than anybody you ever met. And
Wow.
I've met more great trumpet players because of Lou Soloff. I'm gonna give you one story about Lou Soloff. I was called to play at the opening of a synagogue on Lexington Avenue. So I went to a synagogue and I played, and they gave me a shofar. So one day, this after years of knowing Lou, and Lou had played with blood, sweat, and tears, every kind of orchestra gig, played on all the great Fania All Stars, Afro Latin records in the 70s. You think it's somebody from Puerto Rico or Cuba, it's a little Jewish guy. So It goes on and on about what Lou could play. He could play. My first jazz band in the 80s of all kind of young people playing. Lou, they did their first gig with Lou. The first time I heard Sergei Nakarikov was because of Lou called me. We heard Phil Smith play the Brandenburg Concerto. I could just tell you time after time of Lou saying, "Man, let's go hear this. Let's go check this out. You know these trumpet players in town. Let's go see their section." Just the love Lou had of our instrument. So he comes to my house one afternoon. He said he was coming from synagogue. So he had a shofar in his hand. He said, "Hey man, have you ever played a shofar?" I said, "Yeah, man, I have one in my living room." He said, "Oh yeah." He said, "He started playing his." So I said, well, let me get mine. He said, "Yeah, I want to show you some things, some things." I said, "Okay." Then we started to get ready to play, and he started to play the blues on his. He was crazy. He was bending notes. So I started playing on mine. We stood there and played those shofars for like 15 or 20 minutes. And then he looked at me and said, "Man, what are we doing?" So, it's just to keep that kind of love of the instrument of playing. And if you'd have heard how terrible we were playing, we were just, but that Ram wanted his horn back.
Wow, what a great story.
Yeah, Lou
I think
Solo.
I think that's the kind of stuff that happens too with BUTI. That's really where you can fall in love deep with your instrument and your peers just sitting out on the lawn
That's right.
playing around.
That's right.
Amazing.
When you get around people instead of letting the kind of competitive vibe that takes you out of your ability to learn mode, be getting that vibe that Lou was on. He didn't feel that type of competition toward people. He loved to talk about the positive characteristics of different people's playing, and when you were around him, it was a lesson.
Yeah. How I have another question from a student from Aiden Power. He wants to know how you handle setbacks in your life, right? In your career, like, not everything is a straight upward trajectory. How do you handle that?
I'm afraid to fly, so I always think about like a plane has to go through turbulence. You got to keep going. You got to keep going forward and try to get to a higher altitude. Like you can't. Once I was in Italy and I was on a plane that was hitting terrible turbulence.
Oof.
The pilot came on. He said, "I've gone to every altitude. Gone up, come down." He said, "But we're over mountains, and mountains will be mountains. Sorry." And that was that. So I think in life you got to just look down the road. If you don't like what you see in front of you, change your focus. If you don't like what you see down the road, look in front of you. Change your perspective. And just the main thing is to just keep going forward, even if it's little small steps. Sometimes you have a setback, and you have to accept that too, because like I was saying, we all have different lives and different challenges. I grew up with a brother that was extremely autistic before you had ever heard of autism. He's
Hmm.
still nonverbal. And we'd be working with him, and my mom and everybody would be thinking he's going to talk or but he never did. But it does not mean that he was not productive in his way. Or it doesn't mean it's things we couldn't understand. We're always trying to touch on him and mess with him. Then we found out he just wants you to leave him alone. So
Right.
it's it's things I remember when my mother found out he was autistic. It set her back. She blamed herself. She went through a very deep human thing. We had a lot of kids. We didn't have money. It was a struggle. And then we have a brother that has something we never heard of. This is in the 70s. Nobody really knew what autism was. But she survived. We survived. He survived. You got to keep. Don't put the fake happy face on unless it's something trivial. If something profound happens to you, absorb it. But if something trivial happens to you, put the fake happy face on
So keep going.
and keep going. That's right.
Yeah. And another question from a student. This is from Zachary Hummel, who would like to know, as someone who's interested in pursuing both classical and jazz performance, how can I balance both genres in my career?
In classical music, you might be able to get a job if you can win an audition or play or you do recitals. Or in jazz, you have to figure out how you're going to create a job. And then you have to always deal with a critical community that's against people who can play. Jazz is an uphill road. I'll tell you, when I met Ella Fitzgerald, she was in a wheelchair. And I went over to shake her hand. I was very deferent, of course. She looked at me. She said, "I know who you are." She said, "I know you want to play the music." She said, "Good luck, son. It's going to be very difficult." So I thought, okay. I didn't expect at the time, expect she going to tell me just something meaningless, something that, smile through, just yes, Mr. So, and in terms of balancing things in your career, it depends on what you want to do. And I couldn't really continue the schedule that I had, where I was playing with orchestras sometimes and playing jazz. And so I stopped playing with orchestras. It took me a long time to just kind of get my chops together. And then I wasn't getting better playing one. But that doesn't mean you can't do it. Everybody's life is different. Their blueprint is different. Their capabilities are different. Their talents are different. Without hearing you play and knowing what your talents are, do what you think you can do, and just organize your time to be able to achieve what you want to achieve. And then be willing to go through what you will have to go through to be successful to the level you want to be successful, and it'll work out.
Did you think when you were 17, when you were over there at Tanglewood, that this is where you'd be today, doing so much of everything?
No, I didn't think that at all, because I had grown up seeing my father struggle to play jazz. He always played in small clubs. There wasn't a lot of audience for it. I saw him play in bars and dives and hotels, and he could play. And I loved hanging with them. That was my environment. I grew up in clubs. I figured I could just get gigs and do what they were doing. So yeah, a lot of stuff that happened. No, I didn't plan on that. I mean, I didn't. Even to play like with symphonies and stuff, I had given up on playing classical music. And a teacher of mine from New Orleans came to New York and had to do a radio show. And he said he wanted to play the Vivaldi two trumpet concerto, and would I play it with him? I hadn't even been playing piccolo trumpet, so I think I got a piccolo from somebody, and we played it, and someone made a tape of it, and a person from the CBS records that I was signed to play jazz heard it and said, "Man, would you like to make a classical record? Because we have money we can't use in communist countries. They call it block funds. And we can send you over there and you can record it." And that's how I did my first classical record. And that was eye-opening to go to what was then Czechoslovakia, Prague.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna just tell you another story that's interesting. When I went there, the orchestra really didn't sound good. So we left after 2 days of playing and went to London, and I recorded with a studio orchestra. And I thought that they weren't playing because I was a brother. Okay, coming from the South, and all the prejudice you have to deal with all the time. And the North
Right.
wasn't that much better, but I couldn't sort of. So we were all saying, "Man, I wonder why they're playing so bad." So we left. Now let's go back. I was 21 then. Now I'm 50, and I get a gig to play in Czech Republic. And I'm sitting. We played a gig. We're sitting down after the gig. Me and the promoter of the gig. He said, "I'm your same age." I said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm a trumpet player." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah. I was in the orchestra that was there when you came and left."
Well,
He said, "We all thought, wow, we don't play good enough for this guy." So I looked at him. I said, "Man, I thought y'all were playing like that on purpose because I was a brother." And he said, "Man, let's get 2 drinks." And we we said we actually started. I mean, we started laughing about it. That was a long time ago. But to show you how misconceptions are, all those years I was convinced of that, and all those
yeah,
years he was convinced of another thing. And life is a certain way. There's a lot going on out here that we don't know.
that's true. And at that time when you were really just playing jazz, you didn't really see necessarily a classical career. There's a question here from Barton Zapata, who's also a trumpet player. He wants to know what some of the differences and similarities are between orchestral playing and jazz playing. I mean, there have to be some crossover for you to be able to, to be there like that.
Well, orchestral playing, you have to know the literature, you have to know the function, you have to understand the music, you have to have a certain type of attack that's very heavy. You have to be very accurate when you're playing, and you have to fit in the section and in the orchestra concept the way that you fit in, and you have to be a fit for your ensemble. So, and you have to know 300 or 400 years of music and be on top of it. It's a lot of pressure playing trumpet in orchestra. A lot of trumpet players I've known through the years, being the age I am now, they struggle and they talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, uh, in jazz, You have to come with your own sound. You have to have a concept. You have to be able to recruit people to play with you. You have to defend that concept, and you have to wither the withering kind of barrage of criticism that's based on race more than on music. Even if you're white, you have to do it, because if you don't go along with like being playing pop music or imitating the European avant-garde, you're gonna struggle. So jazz, and then so far as technically, the technique is different just because it's a different way of playing. You're playing much more of the time. You have to know the history, kind of the traditions of that. But you have to be able to move people in an audience to want to continue to come out and hear you play. Whereas a symphonic orchestra, you have the advantage of the music of Beethoven or Shostakovich or Ligeti or whoever's music you're playing. It's you have a library of great music. In jazz, if you're playing your own music, it might not be great. So you better be able to play. And there's a movement in jazz that's against playing great music, that's against being competent, that's against, and that's in the papers of record, like the New York Times, and jazz. It's like a kind of cultural conspiracy, but it's not organized like a conspiracy. It's a natural outgrowth of a kind of liberal racism. That if you can't have your head rubbed by somebody who doesn't know anything, then you're not doing the right thing. You have a bunch of experts who know less than you that are telling you all the time. Not saying that orchestral music does not get critique. You have to deal with conductors and other things.
Hmm.
But jazz is, jazz is a different. You got to learn how to play on these grooves, learn how to play on changes. You have to generate the music you're playing. So you have challenges. Both you have challenges. In classical music, you have to win an audition. I remember one New York Philharmonic audition. Because I lived next to Lincoln Center at that time, one New York Philharmonic audition, I knew maybe 20, 25 trumpet players of the 80 that auditioned.
Right.
And people were calling me, I should have won. I should have won. All of y'all couldn't have,
Yeah.
should have won. So, it's hard to get a job. It's hard to get a good job.
Yeah. I'm surprised to hear you to talk about jazz like that, because I also have heard you say things like, jazz is kind of a natural synonym for democracy and how that
what,
can work. But
what state is democracy in?
fair.
That's the state jazz is in. I could tell you, if I go on to look at a bandstand and I see 6 people sitting on a bandstand and each of them have a monitor and the bass has an amp and it's louder than the entire band, that's democracy right now. How y'all need monitors to hear yourself with the person you're playing with standing right next to you? That's one thing you can learn from playing orchestral music. Bunch of trumpet players hate it. We have to play softer when those oboes are playing. We don't like it. We don't like it. But
Yeah.
yeah, you have to play in balance. You're playing behind a soloist that's off, you have to play so. And our music is just sometimes it's like a free for all up there. And many of the things you see in our democracy, you see in our music. And they've been there for a while. The main thing you see in our music is an absolute sellout of ideals and absolutely no integrity. Go to a
Right.
jazz festival, man, almost nobody's playing jazz. Somebody holding a horn, they play jazz. But when you look at our democracy, look at how our government is working. Look at how that $1 trillion that just got given out worked. Man, it's just everybody who knew anybody, they got a whole pile of money. The people got a handshake. It's just we need to clean our stuff up. And when in jazz we need to do that too.
That's true, actually. And at BUTI especially, we talk a lot about being community members and using our craft and using our art to be a part of that. But in the same vein, I wonder, people like you, people like me, what is our responsibility to as educators at this point?
I mean, I think the only thing you can do is be as truthful as you can with your students and try to help them get where they are trying to go. Maybe you can suggest this, but people generally, when they're trying to go somewhere, even with kids, it's like that. You you
Yeah.
know, I think so. They're there to learn what they can learn. We can't proselytize to them. They're not a flock. They're students. So
Yeah.
I think but to listen to them and what they want to do and then provide them the benefit of your best experience and your knowledge to make them be as strong as they can be in their own belief. Like I really believe in activating your ability to activate yourself and not be like a clone of what I think or what any teacher thinks. Activate yourself and really consider things and how you feel about things and find a course of action that allows you to be independent enough to influence your group in a positive way.
So even in light of everything that's going on, what I'm hearing you say is still the focus should be just on the students and what they're trying to do and trying to help them along with that.
Yeah, I mean, we can't, we can only be what we are. Like what I said about Lou Soloff, he was what he was.
Yeah,
He didn't have to preach to you about not talking bad about other trumpet players. He didn't do it. So if you were the type of person disposed to that, there was no air for that. That wasn't who he was. He
right.
didn't have to tell you, go out and hear your colleagues play. He went out and heard them play. He didn't have to tell you, he loved younger musicians, trumpet players. He would tell you, let's go hear so and so.
Yeah,
Or Doc Cheatham, it could be a 90-something-year-old man. Let's go hear Doc play on Sunday. It's just so. I think for us, we have to set that example for them in what we have and what we are like.
I agree. And to go back a little bit to what you're saying about jazz as a reflection of democracy and of times, there's some othering going on, right? And actually, one of our students, her name's Alicia Donlin, she's a French horn player trying to get into jazz, and she wants
Right.
to know, what are your opinions on the use of French horn in jazz, and do you have any advice for her going forward?
Well, it's not a lot. Julius Watkins was a great French horn player. There's not Gunther Schuller played horn, so we would talk about that all the time.
Sure.
You could just because there's not doesn't mean there won't be. But jazz is a difficult field.
Hmm.
So anything in jazz, bass, trumpet in jazz, there are people playing, but there's not a lot of jobs. It's hard. You have to create your own space and your own environment. But I recommend every people study it and know about it because it's going to teach you so much about life and the ability to improvise and to find your own thing and to consider your viewpoint and to deal with negotiating creativity with other people in the space is educational. So I recommend you might show people get that old left-handed horn out. Let's see.
How do you create a space for yourself in a field like jazz where it can be so tough?
It's like you create a space for yourself in any field. If you baking pies, it's tough. If you're selling automobiles, it's tough. If you designing rockets, it's hard. If you want to, I don't care what you. It's so many people on Earth, and so many. Find space. There's spaces. There are some spaces there. Find that space and nurture it and grow into that space. But it's all based on what you can see. You got to look at stuff to see it.
Gotta make good pies.
Yeah, you got to make good pies, or if you're going out to hunt, you got to have your eyes peeled, and you got to. And if you're going out to fish, you got to take your time and be patient,
Right.
but you got to be deliberate. So there are many things you have to be, but the main thing you have to be is present in your own dream of yourself. So if you're present in that dream and you're for real, you're going to find stuff that there's no way in the world I could see.
When you were young, did you spend much time like setting aside time for yourself to think about, like you said, being present in what your dream is?
Not in that way, but I was always around so many good people and studying and reading and practicing. I knew a lot of great artistic figures, and being in the Afro American culture at that time, I was one of the only younger people who liked like theater. So I got to know August Wilson, or in art, I got to know Romare Bearden, so I could go to his house. You can't, kind of heavyweights like that, you can't. The education I got from them is no way I could have paid anybody. I mean, he's not people even who teach or to go to Ralph Ellison's house and hear him talk about his books. Not even his book, just hear him talk about books. Or the relationship I said I had to Gunther Schuller, or the great Albert Murray, just the books he told me to read and the things he knew about it. Just you pick a subject, William Faulkner, American history. So I spent a lot of my time studying. I was always around older people, and I played a lot of gigs. So I was playing a lot, and because I had grown up always around people playing gigs, no matter how unglamorous or small, it was more a natural part of my life.
So speaking of playing gigs, you're doing a lot of a lot of work as your artistic director for jazz at Lincoln Center. What is that like? What what's your life like over there?
We have a lot to do. We had to cut $20 million out of our next year's budget, and we're trying to stay alive. It's like it's a
Yeah.
struggle. So now we're working. All of us, it's 120 something people, and we're trying to figure out what we can do to use the resources we have to remain in play until we can go back to work. And it's challenging. It's
Are
not.
you
It's
doing
not.
any are you doing any thinking about, value, like, and core, you know, mission or product, getting back to
That's
the
all I ever think about. I mean, I don't get back to it. I mean, all I ever think about is the level of quality of what we're doing. Our mission is education. We're in the middle of a 2-week summer camp right now. I've been up for the last 4 days working on my lectures I have to give. So, and we in the orchestra, we're talking to each other all the time about the level we want our thing to be on.
right.
And we do performances. So when we're not playing, we can't get together. But we're always trying to play and be for real. And our advocacy, we advocate for the music, and we try to get more and more people involved in the music and talk about the music. And in terms of our organization, yeah, we're trying to figure out how we can be better online, have a higher quality of what we're doing. We don't feel we can be competitive financially online. We just don't see that. We see more opportunity in just people supporting us because they know this is a tough time. And in terms of our planners, we have a management meeting every day. So we have one today at 4 o'clock, and we
Wow.
have one tomorrow, and we have an all staff meeting now once every 2 weeks because we're in the summer and we meet with the board. I mean, I'm having a meeting every day about
Hmm.
how we're managing the organization and what we're trying to do to stay afloat and be aggressive in the space, not just to survive. But
Sure. And you said you're in the middle of this 2-week program. If what kind of things are you saying to your students to keep them engaged, to keep them thinking that they're still on the trajectory? Because it can feel, I think, in this time, especially not being able to be together, that you're sinking or you get stuck or something.
my class is about how to listen. So I'm not talking to them. It's on Skype. It's like a couple of thousand people on the class, and they're all ages.
Oh, wow.
So I'm
Yeah.
talking to some people are, I don't know, 10, some people are 70, some people, and many of them are not musicians. So
Hmm.
I'm actually trying to stay up and listen to music all night. I was listening to John Zorn's music last night. I'm trying to listen to more stuff than I listen to see what can I tell people that will be of interest to them if they aren't musicians, and tend to my own education. And I'm not, by my demeanor, you're gonna know that I'm optimistic about stuff.
Right.
Like, hey, this is what life is. It could be a lot worse. And we need Gunther here. He would start talking about Stalin, and the Holocaust, and he would always, how many people died in the Middle Passage, and Gunther would take you down through there. What we learned from Mr. Frankel's book is we learned this, and it's the same as the connection between that and what Solzhenitsyn was saying was, what I'm saying?
Wow. So I guess you're keeping busy and keeping positive through this time.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm busy, but it's a blessing.
Sure.
It's a blessing, and I don't take it for granted. That's why it's important to pray before you eat. I always tell people, pray to this cup if you don't believe in God. I don't care. Bow your head and be humble. Pray to yourself. Just it's important to genuflect and show humility. And in your life, if you can do that 2 or 3 times a day for the rest of your days, just the act of genuflecting and being humble. Don't let whatever your belief is get in the way of you understanding the necessity of that, because a time like this will make you understand. Uh, I remember I was in the house of John Lewis, who was the great music director of the Modern Jazz Quartet. He and Gunther Schuller were very close, third stream music and stuff that we'd be arguing about. And I was just complaining about somebody had written something about me I didn't like. I was just complaining. And John was very, very quiet, but unbelievably pithy when he would say phrases. So he was trying to rehearse. And it was I was lucky to be in his house in the midday hearing him play and playing with him. So he was listening to me, and then finally I took a break in my complaining. He said, to complain for a long period of time about criticism of oneself is a hidden form of advanced egotism.
Ha.
can we rehearse?
Oh, wow.
So, you know, he,
Wow.
you
And
know,
then you were able to rehearse after that? Wow.
well, yeah, I mean, I was so much younger than him, and I loved him and respected him, and he's a jazz musician. He's John Lewis, you know. And then I was in my 30s, so you know, I had a band I was playing. It wasn't like I was a young kid. Yeah, I was able to rehearse. I loved him. I respected him. I was happy that he talked to me so directly. And now, when he was passing away, I went to his house a day before he died, 2 days before he died. And I normally would joke with him because he was very serious.
Hmm.
So I came and I saw him. He said, "Hey, man," he looked bad. He said, "How you dealing with this pressure?" So I started to joke. I said, "Man, you don't want with pressure on you." And he looked at me like, "This is not the time to joke." So, you know, you have your relationships in your life that are, when you get to a certain age, people who passed away and great figures. I was lucky to know him and meet him. He taught me so much about music.
Sure.
John Lewis could play, and he just was engaged, and he taught me more about not about all the extra notes I would play that didn't mean anything. It would be through the way he played. And you know, reflect on it, and you just understand that you. One time, Mr. Lewis told me one thing. I'm gonna tell you, it was funny. I always call him. I say the same thing, Mr. Lewis. You know, this Wynton. You got any time for me today? You know, I say, you got any time for me today? See if I could go by his house. Keep in mind, again, I'm not. I mean, I have kids at this point. I'm grown.
Sure.
So he said one day uh, he said, for you, I have some time. For the music, I have all the time in the world.
Oh,
So,
wow.
you know, it's a lot of little things like that that people would say, like Dizzy Gillespie and Sarah Vaughan, and people I have the honor to be around and know. Art Blakey. I think about it, you know, the stuff they told me.
So, just going back a little bit, give gratitude in this
Got to
time,
give
all the
gratitude.
time.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
what about practicing? Practice tips, how to stay motivated, how to stay focused. What's the plan?
You know, write a schedule out and keep it. You know, practicing sometimes is like a diet. You have to just keep it. And if you don't keep it, you gain weight. Like it's just,
Sure, that makes sense. Oop, looks like we lost a little connection. Give just a second here. All right, we're back. I
did we
think I
get it
lost you
back?
for a second. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was telling my daddy about practice, and he said, I was saying, man, jazz, you know, jazz is hard to play. He said, man, jazz is not hard to play. Anybody can play jazz. It's hard to play good. And since you don't like to practice, just settle for playing. So, you know, if you wanna play good, you gotta practice. And once you embrace that as a fact, there's no problem.
So, gratitude and practice, and then
Embrace practice.
embrace practice
You know,
like a diet.
and
Stay with it.
yeah, like yeah, no, treat practicing like you treat a video game you like to play, or surfing the internet, or whatever it is your favorite thing to do. That's non-productive but fun. Say to yourself, I think practicing is just like this, whatever it is, because we all have different things that we love to do, and it doesn't mean don't do non-productive things. I think one good thing is schedule your non-productive time. If you put your non-productive time on a schedule, it keeps it from bleeding into everything.
Yeah, it's kind of sequestered off. Think of it kind of inside out. That's the
That's
time you
right.
have to schedule.
Yeah, yeah. Schedule that time.
That makes a lot of sense. We're coming close to the end of our time, and I want to be mindful because I could stay here all night chatting with you. But I like to know, I'm so heartened to hear about your optimism and your positivity through what is kind of a wild time. Um, so I really want to ask you what's coming next?
If I knew that, I would be focusing on all kinds of stuff that you can. No, we don't know the future. Even in physics, you know, it's like if you study particle entanglement, what is a particle before it was observed? It could have been any one thing or the other. That's one of the kind of rules and basic fundamentals of life. You can make a kind of supposition, you can guess, and maybe stuff falls in place. But whenever somebody asks me what's going to happen, I always tell them I thought Michael Jackson's record Thriller was not going to sell, so don't go off of me.
Wow.
Some things I know, but I don't know that. But I just know that it's important to participate in whatever is next. you know. But don't run from it. Embrace it. Embrace this moment. Get on top of that wave, and you know, get out there in the street. Do your thing. Whatever your thing is, do that, and be a part of change and embrace this time. This is a very interesting. It's unstable, but that makes it very interesting. You know, be happy to not have to be bored and to have to hustle and struggle to survive. Sometimes you have to be thankful for that because that brings things out of you that normal circumstances don't bring out of you.
Thank you. Give gratitude, be part of your community, be part of change, focus on your practice time.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. I loved it. Our students loved it. Thank
Thank
you
you.
deeply. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nicole. My
I hope
trumpet
you
players,
have,
I want my trumpet players to show respect to David Krause now. That's my man. Practice that stuff he gives y'all.
you hear that, guys? Next summer. All right. Thanks,
All
sir.
right.
We'll talk to you soon. Have a
Thank
great
you.
night.
All right. Love and respect. Y'all take care. All right now.
Bye bye.